Um, you're so good at that. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is Ann Arbor Solar Stories, hosted by the GLREA. I am Julie Roth. I am the Energy Team Manager at the Office of Sustainability and Innovations for the City of Ann Arbor, and I help host these Ann Arbor Solar Stories. Let me see if I can share my screen. I can. So, mm, okay, so this is where you are. You're at Ann Arbor Solar Stories. Our speaker tonight is going to be John Beeson, who is a green architect in Ann Arbor, amongst many, many other hats that he wears. And I imagine many people on this call might recognize or know John. We'll see. We'll find out. Thanks to the financial sponsors of the Solar Stories, which are the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE, and Homeland Solar, McNaught McKay Electric Company, Harvest Solar, and Synergy, without whom we couldn't put on these programs. In case you're new, so you know, there are Thursday night energy events just about every week through the GLREA, and you can sign up and find out about them as they come. The first Thursday of each month is this, Ann Arbor Solar Stories, which is Ann Arbor Solar Stories, just like it sounds. The second Thursday of each month are clean energy seminars hosted by Mark Clevey. That can be around anything from policy to technical aspects. The third Thursday is Detroit Solar Stories, very much like Ann Arbor. And then the fourth is either my solar story from anywhere in Michigan that isn't Ann Arbor or Detroit, or an energy Q&A where you can come get lots of questions answered from all of the technical folks that like to hang out on Thursday nights with the GLREA. The GLREA is a nonprofit 501c3. It was been around since 1991, and it is supported by members to educate and advocate for renewable energy in the Great Lakes region. And that is what they do. They educate like this, and they advocate massively. And some of that advocacy, as we all know, has had some pretty impressive payoffs just recently with the clean energy bills that have passed in Lansing. So you can be a member of GLREA if you are not. You can financially sponsor a membership for a local teacher or student who you think might be interested in clean energy. And you can grow membership by just letting other people know about these solar stories and ways to get involved. So that's just kind of the introduction. And I'm glad that you all are here. So I'm going to give it over to John, who's going to present about his solar story. And then we'll have lots of time for questions. And yeah, take it away, John.
Great. Thanks, Julie. I will share my screen and set this up going. So is it working yet? Sharing a screen.
No, we are not seeing your screen.
Yeah, hold on. Let's see what happened here. Curious, very curious.
You're just seeing all the boxes.
All right, let's try this again. Share screen. Number 3, share. Now what do you say?
Got it. We see like
Yeah,
sort of speaker view or whatever, but
let's try it. Let's see if we can get going here. How about this slideshow view? Does it work now? No, it's going on a different screen.
No, there's this weird thing that you often have to do that if you have multiple screens, it's showing the other.
Yeah, I will get it to work on the other screen. Watch this. Okay, it should be going up. It's not going. Oh, it's on my black screen. How's that?
Nailed it.
Okay, so I'll just kind of get going, seeing how this can get moving in the right direction. So, I'd be remiss to kind of start with like my solar story. And my solar story really came out of this mindset from Henry David Thoreau. And it really came from an environmental drive since I was probably in 5th grade, where I learned about solar energy. And it started by doing a solar hot dog cooker. And I made a hot dog really hot, fast, and was like the celebratory person in my whole middle school about how I made this solar hot dog cooker. And I kept thinking about the power of the sun at that point, and just being pretty engaged with that. So, the environmental aspects certainly took over my mindset. Disasters were also something I grew up around, particularly the Exxon Valdez was something in my heyday that was pretty impactful. And then I learned about how, 10 times the amount of oil that was spilled in the Niger River Delta during like a 10-year period, 10 times the amount of oil was spilled from the Exxon Valdez as what was spilled in the Niger River Delta, just by extracting this stuff that we need to power and engine everything that we use. And it just kind of boggled my mind. So I know that there's kind of impacts that buildings have, and that was the kind of venture I took into my professional career, understanding that building impacts are pretty big. The other piece of the pie is transportation and then industry. And so I kept looking at the building impacts and thinking this is where I could probably go professionally. But as I kind of ventured off into learning more about this stuff, I kept thinking about all their, how to make a green building, how to be green and make it greener. And solar was certainly part of that. I got my solar installation certification in 1994 up in Brattleboro, Vermont. I thought I was kind of a cool kid in college to be like, hey, cool, I can install solar panels. And, there was no market for it, but I at least had a certification I could go and do it if I wanted to. A lot has certainly changed since then. The price per kilowatt is drastically different since 1994. And I also learned that the greenest building is the one that's already built. We have an existing building stock in this country and around the world that is pretty unique on what capacity it has and how it was designed in order to manage that capacity. And the number one thing that we keep thinking about is, well, it's really tough to add solar to these existing buildings. And it's like, well, it is, but there's a lot of things we can do before we get there. So like, here's my house when I bought it, massively shaded by 2 pine trees that did a great job of shading it in the summer. But man, it was in shade pretty much all the time. And so I kind of looked at that existing building, and to me, it was kind of like a matter of math for me. I sat there and said, well, I just need to make more out of what goes into and is already in my building. Like the energy I'm putting tons of energy into the building. There's also tons of energy in the building, just in the fact that it was cut down and built, and all the materials that went into it took a lot of energy. The water that's going to it, the water that was used to make it, the water that's still providing me with showers and drinking water is all things that I can look at in terms of simple math to do a better job of doing with it. So I kind of looked at strategies and benefits and paybacks and did kind of a to-do list. And none of it actually worked in this order, because when you're a new homeowner, you just kind of work the best you have and learn as you go. But most of the people on this call probably are pretty aware of kind of looking at a to-do list of, do your energy audit, determine a few return on investment, tune that envelope, upgrade the energy hogs, and then start harnessing the free energy. And that's really what the focus of this presentation is about, is how do you start doing that? And to me, it's like, you can harness the free energy and you can put solar panels up there, but until you do all these other things like the energy audits and tuning the envelope and really upgrading the energy hogs, you're not doing the PV justice. You're not giving it what it needs in order to be really successful for your house. And at the same time, I also realized that all the decisions I made and the decisions I tried to make would just drive me nuts in general. That environmental issues and trying to be green are not cut and dry. That the picture is much more complicated than you expect it to be. And we try to make the best decisions based on the best practices and the best decisions based on the information in front of us. But at one point, you're going to realize that you did it all wrong. And that was my reality. I started working on my house in the wrong order. mostly because of the preferred approach didn't really match me moving into a house and realizing that, oh my gosh, that window broke, or the hot water tank stopped working, or the front door is cracked wide open. So it was kind of like a process by which I was trying to repair things and then learning a process by which to make improvements. And so I started focusing on kind of design priorities. And for me, it was redesign priorities because the house was certainly designed already. So I wanted to redesign them and pull them from my to-do list. So here's how I started working. I worked to try and tune the envelope, keep the heat in, and keep the cold temperatures out. In other words, really trying to tune the envelope. And I started by taking down all the asbestos fiber siding of the house one by one and just started doing this over time. This is when I had a lot more energy in life. And took apart the siding, started wrapping the house, wrapped it up in foam, took all the siding down, put it in the garage, then stripped all the siding of the paint and then put the siding back up. Bought some more siding just to address some of the gaps, but really focusing on how to tune my envelope. And for me, it's like this, when I did this 20 years ago, the building science was still really new. And if I had to do this all over again, I would take that 1/4 inch piece of foam that I added and make it like 3 inches, or actually I would make it 2 layers of 1.5 inch and stagger the joints, to really make it a really tight envelope. This doesn't go without saying that, the basement was a huge energy hog too. And I addressed that later on too with the thermal imaging. So I brought out thermal imaging cameras and looked at my windows and explored my windows and my doors and started tearing apart the windows and started doing all this work to tighten this envelope the best I can, adding weather stripping and adding storm windows and really getting engaged as kind of a young, spirited homeowner with lots of energy. Finding areas of the house that I was like, oh man, this part doesn't even have insulation, or looking at the basement going, oh my gosh, look at all the heat that's escaping. So I really tried to, again, tune the envelope. And then my second priority was to kind of upgrade the energy hogs, finding big sources of energy use and upgrading those. Lighting is always the easiest one, but appliances like the refrigerator, sure, that's always a big one. But also the mechanical system. I was running, a basic furnace that just, took air that was within my conditioned environment, burned the crap out of it, and then exchanged it to heat the house, but then sent the rest of it up the chimney. Same with my hot water tank. It just, burned all that conditioned air and sent it out the chimney. And so I tried to upgrade those energy hogs and really focus on how to make a improved mechanical system way before I started thinking about going solar. I did have solar on the brain. I actually had solar thermal on the brain. Of course, now solar thermal technologies and their price points are very different than PV, but I still had solar thermal on the brain. So 15 years ago, I started putting in these tanks to help think of how to run the system with a hot water basis. So you can see the tank that I installed on the left. It's got 2 coils, a bottom coil and a top coil. And I ended up running this system pretty non-traditionally, where the top coil became my boiler, and the bottom coil is still saved and reserved for the solar thermal system. But the top coil was the boiler for a bit. I used it as an exchange system with a flash hot water heater. And then I replaced that and just did a direct connect with it because the boiler was water grade anyway. So now the top boiler just is used as a radiant floor system. So I put radiant floors in the basement, replaced the furnace with a water to air exchanger with an HRV in the system, which is great for old homes because these are really compact designs that you can shove in any basement, replace a furnace and shove these in the basement and still get the same kind of water to air exchange. I used water just because it has a much higher capacitance for energy. And when I eventually moved to solar, I wanted to be able to harness that energy of the sun and put it into water as my capacitance or my transfer of energy system. The mantra I took was to build tight on the house, but also ventilate it right. So this is where I began to harvest the free energy. Here's the solar part of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. I'm finally there. I started this in 2013 to apply solar panels to the house. This came on one of the projects of trying to revamp the house to put on a new roof. And I was super insulating the attic at the same time, and trying to figure out why there was so much ice dams forming in certain areas of the house. The thermal imaging told me a lot about what was going on with the roof. And so at the same time, I was like, well, if I'm putting on a new roof, I'm going to spend the money to put a metal roof on there so that I could put solar panels on really easily. And I don't know when I'll put the solar panels on, and I don't know what configuration I'm going to put the solar panels on, but I know that a metal panel roof will make that very easy to manage. So that's what I ended up doing. I looked a lot at the sky conditions and the insulation levels for this area. I started buying the solar panels and started going through a program with one of your sponsors, with Synergy, to get some panels installed. Got the panels installed despite kind of a negative attitude towards renewables and the general payback, especially in 2013. To me, I did it much more as a market transformation. And I still feel it's really important to encourage a lot of these subsidies and encourage the marketplace for renewables. And I knew that I was doing this as a way of encouraging the marketplace. That prolonging the oil inventory definitely won't foster stewardship. And stewardship had to kind of start with me and had to spread outwards with other people as much as possible. So I did install the solar panels. I started getting some good output. I installed them with the help of Synergy. You know, we put them on the east side of the house. It was a hard kind of twist because you could see that the ridge of my house is north-south. It's not ideal in any way to have solar panels. And this is one of those moments where I was like the squirrel getting that nut. I was like obsessing about the fact that I was worried I wasn't going to get my maximum output. I'm not going to get my maximum output no matter what I do. And so I realized that I just have to go for it anyway. Put those panels on, because no panels is better than, having panels is a lot better than no panels at all. And I equated it to recently starting up yoga 2 years ago. You know, I used to joke with people about starting yoga, and a large part of it was like, well, I feel so stiff and so achy. And I'm like, yeah, but if you just do something to move your body, you'll get in much better shape. And I used to use that as a springboard for yoga. Just do a little yoga and you'll find that anything is better than nothing. And so the solar panel kind of aligned with that, where I was like, something is better than nothing. I got these panels on. We installed them pretty far. Well, we installed them where it was easy to install, which was pretty far down on the sloped roof. And as a result, the PV watts wasn't matching. The PV watts is a tool to help estimate solar output for the house. And I wasn't getting the solar generation I expected. It was probably half of what I thought it was. And so I was trying to look for some ways to kind of fix that, or at least troubleshoot it, or try and better understand it. Knowing that the system was also installed as single strings, and that if one of the panels was shaded, it basically shut down the whole system. And this was, of course, 2013, 2014, when there wasn't a lot of availability of either charge controllers or microinverters. So I called up a superhero of mine, Sumter Solar, and they came in and did a quite brief reevaluation of what we could do. And then at the same time, it's like I had bought the inverter with the mindset that I knew I was going to add more panels, even though DTE was very restrictive about the number of panels I could install. And I said, well, I know eventually my electric usage is going to increase. I can at least buy a bigger inverter than what they're going to allow me that reflects the solar panels, but they'll never know anything about the inverter. So I got a bigger inverter knowing that I could add more panels. And then with the help of Matt Cadwell and Sumter Solar, we kind of reoriented. So this is the layout. So right down the middle is the ridge of my house. So this now reflects that we put a bunch of new panels over here. So we took the older panels and we're able to kind of squeeze them in this portion of the house. And then we added 8 more panels on the east side of the house, but we moved them all the way up to the ridge, and got them as close to the ridge as we could. And the output definitely increased. I mean, not just because of the new panels, but it increased because of the overall exposure. And I was pretty excited about that. And I was also pretty excited that I was able to get little charge controllers on the back of each of the panels so that I can manage the system and monitor the system in a better way. And then at the same time, I could look at the DTE energy bridge and see on a solar day when I'm making more solar than I'm generating more electricity than I'm using. So here's like a day in February where this is the day that it switched. Like if I looked at the same day on a sunny day on February 15th or whatever, it would still be green all the way around. February 24th tends to be that flipping point for me, just like October 28th is the flipping point for me for my house as well, where I tend to use more electricity from the grid than I use on my solar panels. So again, I'll kind of backstep a little about the strategies. You know, if you're thinking of solar and you want to do more solar, look at the rest of the house first. Make sure you're tackling the rest of the house first. And then look at harnessing that free energy. And then as you're harnessing that free energy, you could kind of wash, rinse, and repeat this whole strategies and benefits to-do list to target what other improvements you want to make. So what other improvements do I have in my house? These are some of them. So here you can see the solar panels as they were originally installed. And again, I rearranged them all. But to the left, I want to electrify. I want to make sure I get electrified kitchen appliances. I also want to electrify the boiler system that I have. In 2010, when I started the mechanical system, it was pretty tough to find a good electric boiler. So now I'm kind of waiting, or I guess I don't know, there's a lot of projects in life. So I'm still negotiating the time frame in which I'll try and get an electric boiler to replace the quote furnace that I have now, the boiler that I have. I'm also trying to get these solar thermal panels hooked up. So I've got some of the piping installed, and you can see they're at least mounted on the back of the house. Again, a very north-south facing lot that's really narrow. Where I could put those panels was really limiting. And of course, if I had to do this all over again, I probably wouldn't do solar thermal, just because you can get so many PVs at this point at a price point that makes just much more sense. But here's my house now. Here's the mechanical system now. I hope you're laughing a little bit, but it's a chaotic system, but it's kind of a cool system too. I'll highlight some things. So here is that tank, that double-walled heat exchanger that has coil above and coil below, and it connects to the radiant floor system. So the radiant floor system is also connected to the flash hot water heater. Here's the flash hot water heater. And here's the radiant floor down here that exchanges from this top coil. I also pull heat out and use that boiler to heat it really fast so that it can heat and get to the temperatures I need for the air handling unit. And the air handling unit works best when the temperatures are above 140, which doesn't work really well when you want a domestic hot water tank that's around 120 because of the scalding potential. So I kind of designed this system to operate based on the control, but use preheated water from the tank. So it's not using the maximum amount. And the flash hot water heater is also, it's got a variable drive. So it fluctuates the amount of heat that it adds and fluctuates on the amount of gas that it uses based on the temperature in and the flow out. What other things? So here's the solar thermal system that I'm trying to add and how that'll kind of preheat all this, the majority of the tank. The tank is so big that it does stratify a lot. But the solar, the PV stuff is all supposed to come in because that's what I want to use to control all the controls, run this hot water tank, and basically do everything eventually with the battery backup. Now, the battery backup stuff is also weird because right now I have an electric car And I'd much rather use my electric car as that battery backup than try and bring in a whole bunch of batteries. So that is still something I'm kind of like negotiating and trying to figure out. I know the city has a program for the solarized where you could buy some batteries. But I was trying to push Matt and his team about the scratching our heads going, okay, what can we do to get my car to just plug in? Because it's got a 64 kilowatt battery that should last a lot of days on my house. And if I can charge that thing with a lot of solar going on at the same time, then I would have a good buffer. So that's my house in the nutshell. I want to show you what I did for the basement because the basement looks amazing. This is a Michigan basement, and I turned it into a radiant floor down on low. It's kind of, it looks like lava. That was kind of the intention, to make it look like lava. And super insulated the basement, redid all the ceilings to get all the electrical conduit out of it. And then just made this as a nice little downstairs cove, all within a 100-year-old house that's got solar panels on it. Yeah, so that's me. Thanks. This is also an example of I'm making a bunch of cookies. This is the example of like failure, right? I was cooking a bunch of cookies to put in my cookie jar, and then I realized I made them all too big. So, it's like, there you go. Nice job.
That
All
is
right.
great. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
If you want to stop sharing, so we can all, yeah, there we go. Very
There we
cool.
go.
Very cool basement, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's
Sweet.
a cool place to go.
Okay, so yeah, we'll just open up for questions, and John, you can moderate your own questions and call on people if you'd
Okay.
like.
All right, let's go with Dave Curtis.
Hi, and thank you. It's a good project, and you brought it forth quite well.
Thanks.
My question is, do you dump hot or warm water back into the well or into the groundwater? Is that a loop, or it's all used on site as it's delivered?
It's used on site as it's delivered. So there was a portion of that schematic that had an indication of a cistern that was going to be utilized. And that is kind of like a wishful thinking plan. But it is something that I was strategizing as kind of a thermal battery, but using water as that thermal battery. So yeah, I was at one point thinking of using that as a way of taking a lot of heat and dumping it in that cistern, and then using the cistern to draw out the heat in the depths of winter. I don't know how well that's going to work, mostly because I've done a lot of work on the house already, and I've lost some energy on doing a lot of this, just mental energy. And while it's been kind of fun and I've learned a lot from it, it's like these complicated areas are just kind of fun to look at. Yeah. That help answer that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Next question. How about John Freeman?
Well, that's my question. How much of this work did you do yourself versus have contractors?
Too much. I would say the photovoltaics was all done by contractors. The rest of the work that I did was all myself.
You have an engineering background of some sort?
Of some sort. I'm a physics major, and then I went into architecture and civil engineering. So I have a civil engineering degree. But most notably, where I learned a lot of this stuff, I did the solar decathlon in 2005 for the University of Michigan. I was the project manager for the MISO house, Michigan Solar. And that project probably taught me more than most people would learn in any grad school program about how to install solar stuff and mechanical systems.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Julie has a question.
Yeah, sort of a comment, and also I was about to say it, and then I read Fred's comment in the chat, which was complicated, and how could a new owner deal with all of that? So I
Yes.
wanted to elevate one thing, and then you can also sort of dive into that. But for some of you may know, and I don't know, some of you may have no idea, but one of the things that the city is doing, has been piloting and working on, I have been working on and piloting, is a home energy advisor service. And we did for this exact reason, because I engage with homeowners all the time through the solar program, and then, educating around electrification and energy efficiency, and the barriers are enormous, right? The barriers, not just cost, but also the complexity, finding contractors, reviewing bids, like where do I start? All of this has been barrier after barrier. And I'm really not the person that people should be asking about sizing their HVAC systems. It's just, I know enough to be dangerous, right? But I'm not the HVAC installer. So anyway, to deal with this, one of the things we've been trying to do is create this home energy advisors service, and we piloted it this past summer. We worked with two organizations, EcoWorks and Elevate, and piloted to 14 buildings in Ann Arbor, a service where basically you can call up and say, hey, I don't know where to start. I want to decarbonize my house, or my water heater is about to go and I think there's something better, or I want solar and I don't know where to start, whatever it is, right? Or there's mold in my basement and something's wrong. And the home energy advisor is a service that can help you. And the first thing it will do is provide a free home decarbonization assessment, that energy audit plus, looking at your potential for electrification and decarbonization, and then deliver you a customized decarbonization assessment. So here's short term what you can do. And by the way, if you're going to have an electrician at your house to put in a 240 for this appliance, you may as well look at your panel upgrade, because we know you're going to, so you have a plan that takes into account efficiencies because you understand the whole path. And then help connect you to a contractor network, help you with bid reviews, help you identify all the rebates and incentives that are available, because that's complicated. The great news is that we put out an RFP and found a company that wants to help us roll this out community-wide. All things, if all the I's and T's get crossed and dotted, it should be in front of City Council at their next meeting on the 18th. And we're hoping to roll it out community-wide by Earth Day. So that can answer some of that, but that's only if you live in Ann Arbor. Because we can't use our taxpayer millage money to, do this sort of deep work outside of Ann Arbor, but hoping that the work that we're doing is priming the market, it's priming the contractor network, it's priming the supply chain, so that it becomes easier for everybody to do. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. So Julie, is it one partner program, or is it a slew of resources to help as the advisor?
No, we contracted with Walker Miller, and they're an energy service provider, sort of.
Yeah.
And we've already designed the program, so we're handing them sort of the pre-designed program that we kind of cultivated with our community partners, and they're going to be staffing it. So it's a pretty lean. We have a not unlimited budget, so it's a fairly lean operation, but we are going to be relying on efficiencies as best we can. We have a few other things that we're rolling out in Ann Arbor, including our rebate program, and that's going to offer some services like income qualification that we can pull from, and that we have our new HERD ordinance, which is that requires a home energy score at the time of listing. So all of that information can go to the home energy advisor, and so they don't have to repeat a lot of the work that was done with on-site assessments. So there's a lot of moving parts and wheels and gears that are, we're still making the sausage, but it's really close.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Next on the question list, I see Lissa. Hi, Lissa. I haven't seen you forever either.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry I missed it. You said you referred to your air handler. Do you have a heat pump?
No. It is just an air handling unit with an ERV and a water to air exchanger in it. And that water comes from my tank.
So this was maybe a dumb question. I'm used to air handling unit being for a big commercial building. Like, are you saying you have a furnace? What is it?
It looks like a furnace. It's the same height as a furnace, same dimensions as a furnace, but it's not. So here, let me share the screen again. And this may help. Let's see if I could get the right screen. Here, I'll just go to this screen. You can see the screen?
No.
They're not sharing.
Share. Go. Is that doing it?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to that one. So this is the unit. I had to get it from Canada at the time that I put it in. This was like 2010. It was called Life Breath. I know a lot of manufacturers now make this, but it's the same dimensions as a furnace. It's just as a variable speed fan. Then it's got the HRV, and you can get an ERV unit in it now. And then it's got the water to air exchange. And so here my tank just kind of sits there and it feeds water into the top tank. My long-term strategy, and that's where the cistern was that I was going to use the cistern as a way of taking colder water and bring it in and using that as my conditioning air. Because I knew I can get the water temperature to be 50 degrees all the time. And that would definitely knock the temperature down in the house from, I would say the house is so well insulated that it takes, I don't know, probably 3 days in a row above 95 degrees for it to get really uncomfortable in the house. But the night ventilation does amazing work. But the more nights that we have that are not below 75 degrees, it's harder and harder to night ventilate. But yeah, I mean, the biggest change was just insulating the house, super insulating it. And the major changes it made on just comfort, and the windows. Like most people rip out their windows and just put in new things. And I took the time to rebuild these 100-year-old windows so that they'd last another 100 years. And that again was not around at the time. Lori Sipes did not have her business out at the time that I was doing this. I wish she did. Otherwise I totally would have hired her and saved a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, there's only a few people now that do that work. Yeah. Next question for Dale Klein.
Yeah, so I like your system and your diagram and everything. I get the same kind of question about how is somebody else going to understand the system? Every time my brother or my parents or anybody else comes and visits, and I try to explain something, they're all confused.
Yeah.
Somebody like yourself would figure it out. Some HVAC professional would figure out any one of these systems that we can come up with. So I don't think that's, people have that as a typical concern, but I'm sure you're not worried about it. I'm not worried about it either, but it's a common question I see too.
It is. And go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, the question that comes out is like, how is a homeowner going to take this? Right. And part of me feels like there are some homeowners that are specifically looking for houses like this because they want that challenge. They enjoy this and they want it, and they want a house like this. Like I had a friend who was selling his house in South Bend, Indiana, and it was all solar stuff and pretty complicated, but that was why he bought it, was because of that. And I was like, really? Wow, that's amazing. So part of me feels like maybe that's my way out. My other way out is that I'm a building envelope commissioning agent in my professional life. So I'm pretty conversed in writing O&M manuals. So I know that I could probably write a pretty wicked operation and maintenance manual on this. But at the same time, not to make it like volumes thick, I think the basis of the system is like, if I took that diagram again and just stripped down all the flow of it, and you just looked at the units operate pretty much on themselves. There's only two things I have to do every year, which is changing out the filter, which is what everybody does most of the time anyway. And then changing the temperature setting on the tank. I set it from winter mode to summer mode on how hot it needs to be. But it basically operates on its own. The maintenance of it is a whole nother thing. Like, oh my gosh, this pipe is corroding. How do I fix this? That takes a little more of a knowledge base that I was not prepared for myself, but I've subsequently learned.
So the other question then, it's kind of a high temperature system. Is that right? Like the air handler is a high temperature heat exchanger, but the radiant has a mixing valve to go down to a lower temperature.
Yes and no. So the hot temperature, so let's say, I should put the schematic up again. Let's see how great I am at sharing this thing. There we go. All right, can you see it now?
Yeah, yep.
All right, so the tank itself, I hold at around 130 degrees. It ranges between 120 to 130, and it fluctuates. And I use something called a tech controller that has a differential, and you can see the different temperature settings that I have for it throughout the year. When it gets below like 20 degrees outside for more than a week, that's when I set it for quote extreme.
Okay.
And the tank temperature is really dictated based on that. So this is the top of the tank temperature. Whatever I set this control to is what the top of the tank will go to and hold. So I pull that water out, and a lot of times that's enough to serve the air handling unit. The hot water, the hot air that comes out of the system is warm enough to heat the house. For a while, I ran that out of this coil, and I wasn't getting 130 degree temperature. I was getting at most 105 at most. And so that's when I changed it to draw directly from the tank. And if it's not pulling enough hot water or getting it hot enough, it runs it through the Renai system. So it'll pull it out of here and it'll go right through the Renai and then come right back in. If the Renai will pick up whether or not it needs to run and make it hotter or not. And that's done by this little tech control. Like once the temperature drops, it kicks the Renai on, and the Renai will fire it up at 160 if I need it to. But I dial it down to 140, so that by the time it does go into here, it's only providing a higher temperature in this area.
Okay. And
Does that
that's
make
an
sense?
electric. That's an electric, or that's a gas heater?
That is currently
Renai.
gas. Yeah, I installed that in like 2010, and I'm hoping to make that electric eventually.
Yep. And so then it's regular domestic water that is going to come out of a hot water faucet is what's in the whole tank. And then the other loops have no antifreeze or anything in them either. The solar thermal is just because it says drain back. So
Yep, it's a drain bag. Well, it will be a drain bag.
well, no,
So
okay,
I have
that's definitely that's a way to do it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I have so I have this installed. I have all this installed, all for the solar thermal. I don't have the piping installed up to here with the air vent. I actually ran into a lot of issues with the city, surprise, surprise, on permitting this. And their big issue was the height. It had nothing to do with the system itself. It was the 21 feet ancillary structure. They saw this as an accessory structure I kept saying, well, it's not a gazebo. It's not a garage. It's not an apartment. It's just a pole. So why does it have to meet 21 feet? And so they're requiring that I cut it down. And so we're kind of at a standstill right now because I also know that the Planning Commission is trying to review this and change the zoning to allow for height for solar thermal structures or solar structures in general.
So you wanted to have that face south, I guess.
Yeah. And I have that facing south. You can see that on this slide. I got it facing south.
So that would
in the
be
back of the house.
Behind your house by the garage.
Yep. And I again had lots of energy. I trenched it underground and into the side of the house. Sounds insane, but yeah. But yeah, that's there. And you can see the height. Like the panels are mounted at 21 feet. And I use this top as a way of servicing it. Like I need that little hoist lift to be able to service it. And they want me to cut it right there, which I could probably just go out and do it. But it's the principle of the thing too. It's like people should be able to install a pole that holds photovoltaics or solar thermal because it is not an accessory structure. It's just not.
Yeah.
That's not a historic district. You're not in a historic district, are you? Is it them?
Nope.
No, it's the permitting. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I've gone through with Brent over and over again. And I even talked to my city council person, and it's been a year and a half. It's still like, come on, people. I even reached out to Missy to get her to pull into this. Yeah. And Zach. Yeah. Still nothing. So help, Julie.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what I could add.
Yeah. All
So
right.
can I ask
Any?
one,
Yeah,
can
go
I
ahead,
ask one
Tim.
more question?
Yeah.
So if in the future, when you go away from gas, if you want to go to a heat pump, I mean, you can either, you have a high temperature, so the heating to the rest of the house is the radiant floor in the basement and then this air handler that heats through ducting through the whole house?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And I personally redid all the ducts, so
Mhm.
they are tight.
So you don't have water emitters in the whole house other than the
Nope.
radiant floor in the basement. So
Yep.
you'd probably stay with heating through air to the whole
Yes.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, like the shoulder seasons, the radiant floor does enough. I may not get the ventilation air that I need in order for fresh air requirements. But you know, most of the time that's accomplished if it open door, open window, what have you. But I could also just set the life breath system to just run on a timer just to circulate the air and get some fresh air in there. But it's also just a few of us in the house, so we're not producing a lot of indoor pollutants.
Does the HRV or ERV, I forget if you said it's an ERV or an HRV.
I have an HRV. The
And-
equipment does come with an ERV option now.
Yeah, but for around here, you probably want an HRV.
Yeah, an
Um,
HRV is all I really need.
And so that unit has a blower like an air handler would for a furnace, but then it has two separate fans for the intake and exhaust, fresh air, stale
No.
air.
No, it doesn't. Let me bring that.
It's
Where'd
just
that image
balanced.
go?
The one main blower causes the right amount of inflow and outflow to the outside.
Yes. Yes. It's got chambers that are within here that pressurize the system and draw it in and push it up.
Okay.
And it's got a little damper control here too, so I can set how much I want it to provide fresh air. Like during the summer smoke and forest fires that occurred, I actually taped these off and just ran the system so that it would continue to filter the air, but not bring in anything from outside.
Yeah, just shut off. Yep.
Yeah, I would say that's the one drawback is that it doesn't. It's not like you need to. It doesn't filter the outside air, right? It's doing fresh air here and exchanging it through so that it's heat. So, but it doesn't filter this indoor air, this air coming in.
Oh, kitty.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Which I would love to be able to like get a filter on this.
You could just
Before
put
it
an
brings it
inline
in.
filter, and
Yeah.
well, you'd need you'd need fans on each duct that you could adjust to get the airflow that you want. But
Yeah,
and then
and that
Yeah.
I didn't think about forest fires at the time putting this in. That's for sure.
right, yeah, that doesn't usually happen.
No.
This has to be probably the most technical solar story that I think we've had. And we've had some other technical solar stories, but this one, no one's like made their whole own like entire mechanical system in their home. It's
Yeah.
impressive, if
It's-
intimidating slightly, but yeah, very impressive for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for explaining.
Sure.
You could, if you want to go back to the boxes and
Yeah, I'm going to look at the box. Okay.
Yep, very cool. Awesome. Other
Yeah, let's
questions
see.
for John? You want to hire him? Anybody? I think it sounds like you ran out of energy though, so we might.
I ran out of energy to
But
do my
you
own
do
stuff,
it.
but yeah, yeah. I do a lot of commercial work. That's mostly where I fit now. Residential is more of a, for me, it was a hobby just to learn kind of the stuff I wanted to play with. But you know, I
doing
do.
commercial work now.
What's that?
What are you doing in the commercial space?
I would say I help project teams manage their lead goals, and their lead goals as in the leadership in environmental design, but also their goals towards like how to make a green building. You know, like everyone comes with a different mindset of what they want to do. And they're like, we want to be green. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? And then we try and help implement exactly what that is. Yeah. A lot of times it's through the lead structure, but it doesn't have to be.
Is it new builds that you're mostly working on?
It's a mix. I have a lot of existing projects and a lot of new projects and new construction existing. Yeah. And, you know, it crosses over from like just setting these goals to trying to do retrofits and doing a lot of commissioning on the retrofit, but it's also like when you have an existing building and you're trying to make it or decarbonize it, what's the path for decarbonization? So we try and do energy modeling and we calibrate that energy model so it's close to the building, and then we start doing energy conservation measures to see how well you can get to that decarbonization, and then add solar.
Solar. I would say, one thing that you mentioned around, what's always been sort of the well understood caveat of efficiency first, right? Like tighten your envelope and use less energy, electrify things, and then get your solar up so you know how much you need.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting experience running the Solarize program, because what I'm finding is that that might have reached its saturation point in terms of messaging. It's just not very sexy, and
It's not.
most people just don't want to engage with energy efficiency as a way into greening anything. They just simply don't, no matter what. So what I have found is that people start with solar. It's like a gateway drug. And all of a sudden they are much more in tune with what they're using, when they're using it, and watching their app or getting the DTE energy bridge and watching what's happening. And now they're like, oh, that energy hog, like I should replace that next. Or
because it's affecting my solar.
Someone left the space heater. Like they start becoming much more aware. So I've seen it work really, really well to get solar first for a lot of people, because it sort of sucks them into the whole big picture. This is what has seeded, I think, a lot of the interest in heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and weatherization in Ann Arbor, because we've now had how many people go through the Solarize program? Probably, oh gosh, let's see. Well, there's been 600 installations. So that means there's probably been about 1,300 estimate requests, which means there's also a lot of people who come to the meetings and don't go solar. They're just learning. So thousands of people have now been through the Solarize program, where we do a lot of teaching about energy efficiency and electrification. So it turns the message on its head, and it's probably not the right order of operations. But like you said, it almost doesn't matter all the time where you start. Like you start oftentimes with whatever is breaking.
Yeah, you do. And again, to me, it's like, just do some yoga. Just go and do something.
Exactly. Just do something.
It'll be so much better. Do something.
Yeah.
And what's an extra couple panels too? Like you might be inefficient, and that inefficiency is probably just going to add like 8, maybe 10 panels to your estimate. Right.
So now you have more panels.
Yeah, and so you have more panels. And if you've got the space for it, great. My house, I did not have the space. I knew I didn't have the space. So I definitely knew I had to streamline. And, the thing that caught my attention when I started this was Amory Levin's negawatt, the notion of a negawatt, the energy you don't need in order to get what you want.
Yeah.
That's
theoretically, if you put your solar on your inefficient house and it's a bigger system than you need, then you do your efficiency. Now you've got excess solar, and then you start electrifying everything. You're going to use it all back up again. So it's sort of,
you get teenagers that use all the different computers and
hot tub,
hot
right.
tubs,
Yeah, it's just an interesting conversation, and something I've just sort of witnessed. Dale has one more question about tech control.
Is that something that's still made, or is that?
That's a good question. I'd have to go look at it.
What's the name of it exactly?
I mean, it's called a tech controller, TEC controller.
Okay.
And I've got I kept everything.
So it's a boiler controller.
It's like a boiler controller.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 2 binders now of like all the work that I did on the house. I kept every receipt and every permit, and
Binders.
Binders, lots of binders. Yeah.
From the 90s.
Yes, real good stuff. Waiting down the shelf up there. Yeah. Well, I guess the other part that came out of this too was like solar was really different
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And to see that transformation is pretty dramatic. Like it had things been the way they were, you could tell that I wouldn't have gone for this water system. I probably would have done a very basic electric system instead, just because of the price point of these solar panels. And like when I installed it, I think it was at $8 a kilowatt. Now it's at what, $2.95 or something. It's crazy to me. And at the same time, it's like what we don't think about too when we install these systems, we're installing these basically these electronic control systems, and they like you'll be lucky if they last 10 years. Like my inverter that I installed, now it's 10 years old. It's acting up. I don't know why it's acting up. It's acting up. And it bothers me because every time I need to kind of work on it or call for a service, even like a service for birds, right? When the birds get under the panels and mess with stuff, that drops my return on investment really quickly, because it's like I'm only saving like $20 to $30 a month. I don't use a lot of electricity. So every time I need to drop like $500 on a service, I'm like, there goes the ROI again. And the inverter is now one that's like poking at me where I've got to replace this inverter and I have no idea how much it's going to be. And
Certainly helps that it's now $3 a watt instead of $8.
It does. It does. Yeah. And the inverter is like, now it's 11 years old.
And don't forget that the value of your house is probably dramatically increased because you're not using as much energy, and you'll get your return on investment back whenever you do sell your home down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's let Jeanette have the last question.
Jeanette, I haven't seen you forever either.
You're muted, though.
Jeanette. You're muted.
Yes, I am. So, hey, John.
Hi, Jeanette.
Blast from the past. I just checked out my infrared video gallery.
Oh, yeah.
February 10th of 2010. That
was
some of
house,
those images may have come from.
Yeah.
That was your house.
I think they were. Yeah, I remember borrowing that. Yeah.
And since then, my infrared cameras have reproduced, and so they're still sitting around waiting to help people discover ourselves.
Yes.
So anyway,
that's what they do.
It was just really, really thrilling for me to see where that all happened, how it all came out. So
yeah,
awesome job. That's
Thanks
great.
again, Jeanette. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember also having to use Jeanette's or somebody's thermal image camera, because when I did the work in the basement, it was just an empty basement when I was done with it, and I got all the radiant flora in, and then I forgot where I put the radiant tubes.
That's right. That's right. Very useful tool to have in the infrared.
I thought I marked it up.
I use it to find studs all the time. It's like I can see where my heat loss is and find the studs at the same time. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thought of that. That the Ann Arbor District Library now has them.
Yeah, but they're always checked out.
You can get them.
They are upstairs a big long line. It's true. It's true.
I'll have to pack them a lunch and send them out to work again. So
yeah, you should.
Yeah. All right. It's good seeing you. Thanks for the talk. It was great.
Yeah. And, I'll push for everybody that, I think a lot of people hesitate on old homes to put these things up. And I think it's really paramount to do it, especially in a east-west or a north-south, east-west orientation. That was something that I hesitated on forever about having the panels on east-west. Just, I kept thinking about, they're not normal to the panels and how that decreases in efficiency. And it drove me nuts to the point where, that those images that I showed were like, you can't be perfect on this. And doing yoga, just get it out there and do it.
Love it. And look at that. We're at 7:59. So to respect John and everybody's time, I think we're gonna thank you so much, John, for coming and sharing your story. It's been remarkable. It's been really, really interesting to see all of the work that you did. And whenever you do sell your house, there is no doubt that the owner is going to be geeked about
yes, I hope so.
What's been done.
It'll take a special person, that's for sure.
I think we're getting more and more of those special people that are house hunting now. So I think your timing is good. So
it's walkable. It's downtown and really close to downtown. Yeah.
And thank you for being an early adopter and a market transformer, because that is exactly what you did, you know,
Yeah.
and you continue to do, because someone has to. So why not John
Yeah.
Beeson?
Definitely. Thanks, Julie.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good